Alright fam, today we're gonna get real wonky. We're gonna go way out there with this thoughts create reality, perception, vibration, consciousness, etc. We're gonna talk about fractals, parallel universes, and quantum mechanics. How this all ties in together with this beautiful thing we call physical reality, or life experience, or being alive. I want to first define what parallel universes, fractals, and what I'm going to be talking about with quantum mechanics is first. Alright, so fractals. This is something that I'm not going to be able to fully put to words because it's describing eighth dimensional consciousness, something that I can only intuitively sense through my emotion and translate to you through verbal language and whatever. Yeah, I get sort of mental pictures of what it is. I don't know if you want to call that channeling or whatever. All I know is that when I'm really present in the moment, I can sort of get an understanding about what eighth dimensional reality feels like or is or whatever, and practically what the eighth dimension is. To us, it's like a combination of all potential physical realities just constantly exchanging information in this beautiful geometric constantly moving pattern. And the consciousness in this eighth dimensional reality is something that we literally cannot describe or perceive from time-space, because I like to consider what we would call the first through seventh dimensions of consciousness, and I'm going to cover dimensions in a different video. The first through seventh dimensions of consciousness as time-space reality. And then we have the 8D geometric fractal matrix that is just pure information. And we would perceive it, if we could see it with our physical eyes, we would perceive it as like a fractal. If you've ever watched those fractals videos where it just zooms in and it's all these crazy geometric patterns, but to the consciousness on that level of life, we can't even tell what that's like, and it's probably immensely beautiful, immensely amazing. But the cool thing about time-space reality is that even though we experience complete and total separation, we experience variety in a completely unique way to this fractal matrix that is projecting this universe into existence. So yes, we are of technically a lower consciousness, but we get to experience reality in a completely unique way that the 8D matrix doesn't experience. And it makes us appreciate the difficulties of living in completely physical separation from one another and from the rest of our realities. It makes it a lot more beautiful. It gives you something to appreciate, because on this 8D level of life, there is no apparent separation between each extension of consciousness. That is the only way that I can possibly explain to you that this matrix works. And what our time-space reality is, or our universe, the way that we experience universe is, it's like a still 8D hypersphere of information that's sort of stuck, and it doesn't move in the same way that the rest of the fractal does, circulating around this 8D hypersphere that's projecting our 3D reality that we experience as 4D thought and perception, and project our 3D realities into being or whatever. So what the difference is between time-space and the 8D fractal matrix, or the difference between this 8D hypersphere that we are within and the rest of the fractal, is that the fractal inherently remembers its unconditionality. And what I mean by unconditionality, I talk about this all of the time. I like to remove the word love from unconditionality, even though that's what I'm describing, because people associate love with relationships between people too much to understand what I actually mean when I say unconditional love. So I like to use unconditionality to describe loving one's own extension of consciousness in such a way that you allow yourself complete and total autonomy and freedom over your experience without disrespecting and infringing upon the autonomy and freedom of another extension of consciousness. That is really what I'm talking about when I say unconditionality. It's being able to be completely harmonious within each and every autonomy. And getting up to higher levels or higher dimensions of time-space reality than we're currently experiencing here in 4/5D on this planet, they literally don't need to consume animals and plants in the same way that we do, or even at all. And these beings exist. It's just that they haven't visited our planet in a long time. We are able to physically see them. They haven't visited our planet in a very, very, very long time. And if they do, they only come to you have to tune your frequency to them in order to be able to perceive them. Some people, like me, perceive guidance from them kinesthetically, or some people it's auditorial, some people actually see beings. But either way, these beings actually exist, and they've gotten themselves to such a deep level of unconditionality that their bodies regenerate without needing food, or at least needing as much food. And I'm sure once you get to like the highest frequency of this time-space dimension, you don't need any food at all. But let's not talk about it in that way, so we don't put ourselves in a position where we're like, oh, I need to get to that level, because that's not really what it's about, and I confuse the shit out of myself for a very long time. So anyways, yes, just by needing to survive, we do need to infringe upon the autonomy of animals and plants. And as we've evolved as a species, we've learned to infringe upon each other's autonomy between people through either intimidation or psychological manipulation, less and less and less. Right now, we're at sort of like a pinnacle point of, I like to call it manipulation or psychological warfare in order to infringe upon the autonomy of other beings. Because in our past, obviously, if you know any bit of history, control has always been exercised through intimidation. And now it's more about psychological intimidation, convincing us to believe about reality in certain ways that hold us back from expanding and from deepening our level of unconditionality. And if you want to get all into the conspiracy stuff and the elite or whatever, whoever, doesn't matter, because we all manipulate each other. We all manipulate. It's not good, but it's natural to us discovering how to influence rather than manipulate. So that's sort of where we're getting to as a species right now, and who knows how long it's going to take. It could be exponential. Time doesn't fucking matter, because the only thing that matters is that the present moment exists. And this goes to something very incomprehensible to us, is that we are living at the same time as the birth of the universe, purely for the fact that time doesn't exist. In other words, at the same time that the Big Bang happened and our physical reality started coming to fruition, the fractal instantly manifested. Because when consciousness became aware that it was there, it instantly, parts of itself instantly remembered its unconditionality in a way that it created immense, beautiful fractal matrices. But there's also parts of that consciousness, and this is us. This physical universe didn't remember its unconditionality in that way. So therefore we needed to experience complete and total apparent, visual, perceptual separation, but there is no genuine separation. It's the illusion of separation. The fractal doesn't experience that. For instance, obviously life doesn't look like it does here, but like I would not be separate at all electromagnetically from this bed. And if you watch my last video, the whole electromagnetic repulsion thing and our physical world is kind of what I explained in the last video. But there would be no visible separation between me and this bed, although we would be differing consciousnesses. There would be no physical separation between me and you, even though we're experiencing different versions or different extensions of source consciousness. That is what the fractal is like. So then there's all these 8D hyperspheres that are sort of stuck and don't move in the same way that the rest of the fractal does, but the fractal's feeding information to it constantly. And what this 8D hypersphere is doing is it's projecting this 3D reality into existence. We are part of that fractal, but we're not aware of ourselves as it, so we're projecting this time-space universe to remember our unconditionality in the same way that the fractal does. And there's even higher levels of life than the fractal. It's unimaginable. But anyways, we live in one hypersphere. There's infinite amounts of these hyperspheres, and they're always constantly being birthed and rebirthed for the purpose of expanding consciousness, for the purpose of consciousness at our frequency remembering its unconditionality in the same way that the fractal does. That is the purpose of physical existence. Will physical time-space reality ever stop existing? I don't know. I can't explain that to you because time doesn't exist. This whole dimension 1 through 7, time-space, is a complete illusion. It's a dream projection so that a part of the fractal remembers who it really is. It remembers its unconditionality in the same way that the rest of the fractal does. This is where we're getting into parallel universes. Parallel universes are parallel 8D hyperspheres that are connected by branches within the fractal and that communicate with one another for the purpose of consciousness expanding and remembering its unconditionality. Every time a person is born, an infinite amount of new potential universes is born throughout this fractal. This is really immense and difficult to explain from our physical time-space, especially a 4D, 5D consciousness, which I'm explaining to you from right now. So yeah, there's infinite hyperspheres. In the minute that I was born, there was infinite parallel universes that represented every single possible and potential timeline. And I'm pulling from those timelines by allowing myself to be present in the moment, allowing myself to escape time. I am pulling the highest and highest frequencies that I possibly can and communicating with different physical versions of me that exist in different places throughout the fractal in order to expand my consciousness in the best way possible. In other words, there's versions of me that are already dead. There are versions of me that already died. And there are versions of me that are constantly being made through my recognition and realization of potential. Same with you. It's insane to explain. So that is what I was talking about when it comes to parallel realities in the last video that I just posted. So yeah, when you allow yourself to be present in the moment, that's what allows you to actually access parallel universes. And I talked about that in the last video. And when it comes to quantum mechanics, from my understanding, I didn't get super into trying to understand the intimate workings, and I'm actually reading a book called The Elegant Universe right now by Brian Greene. I recommend it if you are at all into trying to understand our physical universe. I haven't gotten to the quantum mechanics part, but I have watched his documentary on the book. The documentary practically says that quantum mechanics says that at the atomic level, at the particle level, it is literally impossible to wrap our minds around the way that the atomic or particle world works. It's impossible things become possible at the atomic level. And what this is our cells and our particles, our atoms, are communicating with parallel versions of us constantly. So things that are not possible usually become possible at the quantum level. That's practically what quantum mechanics is. The immenseness of parallel realities existing throughout different places in this fractal is what makes quantum mechanics so wild and impossible to understand, is because there are infinite versions of you communicating with your cells. There's infinite versions of everything around you communicating with infinite versions of itself everywhere. It's crazy. It's awesome. This is why it all ties in together, and I hope that if you find any of this interesting, it helps you understand what parallel realities are and why we are infinite intelligence, why we are infinite potential. This is consciousness. When you tune in to that frequency, when you tune into who you really are, that's why everything becomes possible. And it's only done through unconditionality, through feeling unconditional love for this present moment and the immenseness and appreciation for the immenseness and the beautifulness and craziness of the fact that we even exist physically in this way. That is really what spiritual teachings are all about. It's really just about appreciating the fact that you are here and you don't even have to be here, and using that appreciation to focus potential in whatever ways that you desire, so that you become more and more conscious of how unconditional this love is for you. And we remember that when we spiritually awaken as a human being. We remember our self-awareness and become able to make consciousness of different things when we become human. But when we awaken to who we really are, when we spiritually awaken, we awaken to our ability to appreciate unconditionally and allow ourselves to focus whatever realities we'd like into being. And that's why it's important to hold space for and let go of things that we do not want. Whether it's something that's been reverberating for a while and it feels really unwanted and we've developed a lot of resistance to it, or it's just something that was once good and now it's old, not so good, not wanted anymore. So yeah, this is more of a scientific or impersonal way of explaining what I talked about in all of my previous videos, because all of my previous videos, because I was actually working through a lot of personal stuff myself, had a lot more to do with the personal way of perceiving consciousness. But that's why I wanted to give you a little bit more of the impersonal way of understanding why it is I believe that anything's possible, why it is I say that we are infinite potential, and why it is I say that we are infinite intelligence. Because everything already exists, and that's why Abraham, for instance, says it's already done. You have to step back and allow yourself to experience it. You have to appreciate it as it is, because it already exists. You cannot resist and say that this is not me, because you are one with every single reality that you could ever desire. But it's about appreciating this reality as it is, so then you can actually let it go, move your attention to a new version of reality and a new version of you. So I hope this is comprehensive enough for you to understand, and I love you guys very much.